Hey friends, this is Aaron Summers, and welcome to the Church Brain Podcast. Each week we talk about churches and how they behave during seasons of stress and transition, how leaders can guide people through those moments with steadiness and clarity. Now, this week in the briefing, we talked about why conflict increases during transition. We all feel it. You know this. I know this. So today, I want to talk about how we lead through that conflict as it rises in the transition. How do leaders respond when tension rises inside the church without making the situation worse? Now, trust me, I've got a load of stories of how to make it worse. So out of my failure, maybe you can find success. Because here's the reality. Conflict during transition often feels larger than what it might really be. It doesn't mean it's fake. It doesn't mean the issues are wrong. It simply means that anxiety, whether on the leader's part or the church's part, it actually magnifies everything. An offhanded comment, it feels sharper. A disagreement feels more threatening. A delayed decision feels suspicious. So people start reading tone into emails, texts, and body language in the silence of what they don't know. The emotional system becomes hypersensitive. I really think Acts 6 helps us understand this in some ways. The complaint about the widows being overlooked, that was real. But if leadership had just ignored it, swept it under the rug, minimized it, or even reacted defensively, I think the tension would have spread quickly through the body. Instead, here's what the apostles did. They lowered the anxiety while still addressing the issue very directly. And this is the balance that I think we have to learn as leaders. So let me give you 5 practical leadership moves to help you lower the conflict anxiety during transition. Number 1, separate the issue from the emotion. Now, one of the biggest mistakes we as leaders make is assuming that loud emotion is the actual issue. It's not. A church member may sound angry about worship changes, and, they might actually be angry about them. But underneath that, behind the emotion, maybe they feel loss or uncertainty or fear about the future of the church. A committee member may sound controlling, but underneath, they may fear the church is drifting in some way or another. And if we as leaders only react to the surface emotion, then conversations can become or stay defensive. But what we need to ask is this: what might this person actually be afraid of? See, that question changes how you're going to listen and react and respond to those in your church. I worked with a church once where people became upset over something, relatively minor involving some classroom space. Now, on the surface, it looked like people fighting over rooms, but underneath it was really about whether longtime members still felt valued after leadership changes and ministry was restructured. See, once leaders recognized the deeper fear, the conversation changed completely. Number 2, put a pin in that decision. See, anxious churches rush to judgment, rush to decision, rush to get out of the discomfort and back to comfort. And that's what anxious systems do. People want closure because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. For this reason, churches rush to replace their pastor. Churches will rush to replace a staff member. Churches rush into these decisions simply because where they are now is uncomfortable and they don't like being uncomfortable. So they do whatever they can as quick as they can to get back to some level of comfort. Even if it's the wrong decision, it's at least some decision, and that makes them feel better. You see, but fast decisions made in emotional environments usually create more conflict later on. This is especially true during pastor searches, staffing changes, ministry restructuring. And sometimes leaders think they're calming the anxiety by moving really quickly, but in reality, they may simply be moving too fast for the trust to keep up. Let me say that again. Sometimes we move too fast for trust to keep up with us. Now, slowing down doesn't mean paralysis. It doesn't mean stop. I said slow down, not stop. So putting a pin in the decision doesn't mean that we are stopping. And so we need to find this balance of move just enough, but let trust keep up with us. Don't stop, keep going, but try to communicate and just put a pin in major decisions. See, we have to give people enough communication, enough process, and enough clarity to stay emotionally connected to the decision. Once that breaks, when people are emotionally disconnected from this decision, then we can run into some trouble. See, maybe one of the things we need to say is, now we're not going to ignore this issue, but we want to make sure that we handle it wisely and put time frames on that. We will circle back to this in 30 days. At the next business meeting, we'll give a report and an update, and we will make further decisions. And that can really lower some temperature immediately. All right. Number 3, refuse to match emotional intensity. Don't match fear for fear. Don't match reaction to reaction. Don't match anger to anger. Don't match the emotional intensity. This one is so important. Because when people raise their anxiety level, unhealthy leaders will raise their anxiety level too. And now you've just got a room full of anxiety. Somebody has to be the peacemaker. Somebody's got to be that person of peace. And so now if you don't have that, you've got 2 emotional fires burning instead of just one. Now, steady leadership remains calm even when others aren't calm. Now, listen, leader, that's not easy. That takes some distinct work. You can't sound cold. You can't sound detached. You can't sound uninterested. You just have to stay emotionally grounded. You can be intense without being offensive. You don't have to raise your emotional heat to match their heat. Your tone is going to matter. Your facial expressions matter. Your body language matters. A defensive response from leadership can escalate a meeting in a matter of seconds. I was in the middle of my ministry years. I don't know. I was 15, 18 years in. I'm not going to give you the church name. But I was in the middle parts of my ministry when I noticed how much my body language was mirroring other people. When I made that adjustment, when I decided I'm not going to match tone for tone, I'm not going to match heat for heat, I'm not going to match these things, everything seemed to change because somebody had to be the calm influence in the room. I've seen business meetings completely change direction simply because the chair of the meeting calmly summarized concerns instead of arguing with those concerns. Well, number 4, clarify what people and problems you're actually solving. What problems are you actually solving? What people are you actually helping? See, churches often start arguing about secondary issues while the real issue simply goes unnoticed. For example, a church may argue endlessly about committee structure when the deeper issue really is a lack of trust. Or they argue about staffing when the real issue is a fear of change. Leader, you must keep digging to find the real answer. And this is where sometimes business helps us. Toyota is famous for their 5 whys. When a problem or an issue would be brought up, the leader would simply ask a form of why. Why is this important? Or why is this urgent? Or why must we handle this? Or why is this a concern of yours? Why is this a concern? Now listen, again, go back Tone matters. You can't just throw up your hands and have your face scowl and go, "Why is this a problem?" That's not solving the problem. But be curious in your why. Okay, hey, help me understand why this is a problem. Then wait for an answer. That's one why. By the time you get to the fourth or the fifth level of why, now you're getting to the heart of the problem. Now you're getting to the real issue. And I think Acts 6 can instruct us here. The apostles recognized that there was a deeper issue of fairness and trust within the body, not just about food distribution. I mean, yeah, that's an issue, and they had to fix that, but that wasn't the real issue. It was the issue of Jew and Gentile learning how to live together. Can we trust one another? Can we live in harmony with each other? The food distribution was just the outlet for all of that emotion to flow. And leaders need to understand what's at stake here. What's the real issue? Well, the fifth response is protect relationships while solving problems. This is where churches and leaders can struggle. I've struggled. You've struggled. We've got to protect relationships. And it's a matter of keeping it on front of mind. See, sometimes leaders can prioritize peace so much, conflict avoidance, right, that problems just never get addressed. Sometimes people, which are the problems, never get handled because we avoid conflict too much. However, on the other side, sometimes we attack the problem so aggressively that we burn up relationships in the process. I remember one time that we were in the middle of an event and some things needed to handle. There was some struggles going on, and I simply stepped in and was like, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do. And I took on kind of that crisis management authoritarian role for the moment. What I didn't realize is that I hurt some people's feelings in the process. And I had to go back and make those apologies because I just reacted. I didn't look at it and examine it and evaluate, how do I save these relationships? Now, I get it. Sometimes we're going to say, look, I don't have that kind of time. Well, you may need to make the time. Now, there could be certain crisis moments where there is no time, and I get that, but keep this on the front of mind anyway. How do I not burn the bridges of relationships while also solving these issues? Healthy leadership protects truth and relationships. People should be able to disagree without becoming enemies, but in this day and age, that is so hard. It's so difficult to agree, to disagree, and still be agreeable about it. We just don't know how to do that anymore. We need to learn how to do that. And you, leader, maybe you need to help set that new tone, or a new ancient one, if you will. We used to know how to do that. We used to know how to debate and then still be friends. We used to know how to fight it out and argue it out and still go be family together. But now we want to divide under every little thing. And it's not helping the kingdom's growth. It's not helping the church. It requires a level of maturity emotionally. And it also means that we have to model some restraint in the process. Sometimes the healthiest sentence in a meeting could simply be this: let's assume the best about each other while we work through this issue. That one sentence might change the whole atmosphere of the room and the discussion and the solution and the future reputation of your church. Let me ask you this. Where in your church right now are people reacting emotionally faster than they are thinking clearly? Where are they reacting fast without thinking clear? And how can leadership, how can you lower that temperature enough for wisdom to return? Conflict during transition does not automatically mean that your church is unhealthy. In fact, it probably means it's normal. Sometimes the conflict simply means the church is anxious, it is uncertain, or it's afraid. Help people think clearly again. Acts 6 reminds us that conflict handled wisely can strengthen trust and improve ministry. That is still possible today. Well, hey, thanks for spending a few minutes with me today. If this episode was helpful, share it with another church leader walking through transition or a rising conflict situation. And make sure to subscribe to The Church Brain for the weekly briefing, podcast, and the Friday Leader Note. Remember, calm leadership often becomes the emotional anchor your church desperately needs.